Neshama should have an aliyah.
Amen. So I think, did I leave anything out, gentlemen?
I think we're good.
I think, Rabbi, it's over to you.
Okay, so
And welcome back.
thank you. Lovely simcha last week. We were at an Nafruf. It was very nice for Shabbos. So 2 weeks ago, we just started the sugya on Chof Aleph on the days, the very top of Chof Aleph on the days. We started the sugya of Yir Shalom Midas, and that sugya, the discussion there, machlokas between the Abai and Rava, is whether one can be miyayish without knowing. In other words, normally you have knowledge and you say, okay, I lost it, I give up. I mean, it fell over the ship, it's in the water, there's no way I'm going to retrieve it. So that's a classic case of yish. But what about yish shalom midas? What about if someone loses something, he doesn't know he's lost it, but if he knew, he would be miyayish because it's irretrievable. So this is the machlokes between Abai and Rava as to whether or not we can impute yiyush into a circumstance. So Rashi on top says, Chaf Aleph of the days, yish shalom midas, dava shestama yish, l'geshayoda, shenafel mimenu. If a person knew that he felt that it fell, he would be miyayish for sure. Because shemotza adayin lo yodo habalim shenafel mehen. But and when it was found by the finder, the owner never knew he dropped it. So this is the case of whether we can impute yish so that when the finder finds it, he no longer has to return it because it's hefker. So the Abaya says lo havi yish, Rava says havi yish. Rashi says Abaya says lo havi yish. The Kamim Mefarish Pluktayu. The Gemara is going to explain the machlokas between them. What is the machlokas? And we're about to discuss that now. What are we talking about when we say yish shalom midas, whether it's yish or not yish? So Gemara says as follows in the second line. So Abaya says havi yish, Rava says lo havi yish. I'm sorry, Abaya says lo havi yish, that it's not yish, and Rava says it is yish. So bedover sheyesh bo siman. Let's say the thing that we're talking about is an item that has a siman, has a distinctive mark, where he would, everybody would know, or he certainly would be able to describe it. In other words, it's not like a piece of fruit, which we'll talk about, which the Mishnah says, Paris Mefazorim. You can't distinguish one apple from another, but you can.
Where are we exactly?
Chaf Aleph and Beis at the top.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
So in the Yir Shalom Midas, the Gemara here says, if you're saying the machlokas is v'shiyesh bo siman, that the item that was lost has a specific siman, even Rava would admit that it's not yish. Of course, it's not yish. Not only is it not yish, but the afal gav the shemana the miyayish l'sof lo have yish. But even though at the end of the whole event, if we find out that he was miyayish, he had given up, then it's still not yish. Because when the finder finds it, it clearly came into his hands bi'isura. Why bi'isura? Because we're saying that a davar that has a siman is not miyayish. So when a person finds it, and of course the person doesn't know he lost it yet, but it has a siman. So when the person finds it, you can't impute yiyush because we say the lechi yoded nafel minei lo miyayish. Because if he would know that it fell, he wouldn't be miyayish. Meima Omar, he says to himself, Simona islay begave, I have a siman. Yavna simona, I'll bring my siman, and I'll take it. So in other words, the whole question of imputing yiyush, says the Gemara, can't apply when you have a siman. Because when you have a siman, the person who doesn't know he lost it, if he knew, wouldn't give up because you have a siman. Let's just say, for instance, you went to shul and you dropped your watch. Okay, your watch has a distinctive engraving in the back with your name and other important data, and you say to yourself, I lost my watch. Now, what happens if you're in the middle of davening and you don't realize that when you walked into shul, your watch slipped out of your pocket? So, and then Chaim comes along and he finds a watch. Now, what are we going to say about this person? If he knew, he certainly wouldn't be miyayish because he knew he had it this morning. He knew it fell somewhere, probably around the shul, and he has a simon. Someone will come to him, or someone will announce, "I found a watch. Who lost a watch?" Maybe he couldn't read the simon, so he'll say he doesn't know it's Chaim's watch. And Chaim will say, "Wait a minute, I lost a watch. It's a gold watch. It has a simon that has my name, Chaim, in the back of it. Of course, it's my watch." But let's say Chaim doesn't know that he lost the watch, and the person finds the watch. And what's that person going to say? If that person's going to say, "You know what? I'm taking this watch because clearly whoever lost it isn't going to find it," that's B'Yisura. There's no question that that is prohibited, that he's taking it in a status where it is Isser because there is a simon. And the fact that there is a simon means that if the person who lost it would have known that he lost it, he never would have been miyayish. So even Rava, who says that yish shalom midas have a yish, in such a circumstance, you can't say have a yish because if the person, Chaim, would have known that he lost the watch because it has a simon, he never would have been miyayish. Therefore, the finder can never have taken it, and it can't be hefker.
And so let's use Grand Central Station as an example, where it's not the shul, and there you lost a watch that has distinctive markings. So okay, it's a Casio gold watch, whatever. There you might be miyayish because you're thinking there are a lot of dishonest people walking here, and I mean, you're finding this watch. You're thinking to yourself, whoever lost it, number one, he's probably on a train somewhere already. Number two, he knows that this is a place where you have all kinds of people, thousands of them passing through every hour. So in other words, it's not, what we're saying is it's not a question of the distinctive markings. It's a question of what the original owner would have thought.
Right, and that very case is a case of the Gemara, which we're going to talk about, where it's in a Rishus Harabim, where that becomes a competing factor. You're right that depending on where you lose it, even with a simon, could have its limitations.
Because you are trying to impute what the original owner would think, and in a place like an airport, he might have different thoughts than in
right. So whether a simon really holds a lot of value in that circumstance, that's correct.
If he thinks there's a lost in fact, there are also honest people, he might think differently.
That's
right. Again, that's a factor, correct.
But the basic argument here is that we trust in the regular circumstances that people will return it. Otherwise, the notion of a simon as putting it into the category that you can't use it wouldn't work unless you had some confidence that people are trusted.
Well, this is a good point, because now what you're saying is if he loses it in an area where there are Jews, let's say from Jews, Erlacha Jews, who know there's such a thing as a Shabbos Aveda, and he has a simon, you put two and two together and said, oh, there's a good likelihood. But what happens if he is in Timbuktu, there isn't a Yidden site, and he loses that same watch with a simon? What's going to go through his mind? The fact that it says Chaim on the back of the watch in Timbuktu has very little shaykhis, and there the people don't know from Hashavas Aveda. So even though the circumstance might be that it's not a big Rishus Harabim like Grand Central, it's a small little area, and he loses the watch, his expectation might be different because he has no Havamina that there will be Yidden. Now, even Jews might not return it, but if you're living in an area where there are from Jews, there is a greater likelihood that they'll both see the name and know there's a mitzvah of Shabbos Aveda. And the Mepharshim talk about that. In other words, you have to understand where you are and what circumstance as to whether or not there is this havamina that even with a simon, you're going to be able to get it back. That's very valid.
Excuse me, Rabbi, I think possibly we have Jay Marcus. I don't know if you have any refuah shleimas. Or also Jonathan, maybe yours. So, Jay Marcus, do you have any refuah shleimas to announce?
Not currently, thank you.
Good. Okay, good news. Jonathan, we don't hear you still.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
And
so,
welcome back for Yale.
right, so all these are good questions as to what the circumstance is. So, but stamazai, we're talking about where it fell with a siman in an area where a siman might mean something. Okay, that's what the Gemara's Havamin is. In other words, we're talking about where he dropped it, and there is a siman. And okay, so let's take a look. Rashi, the miashlo the sof la'achar shemotzazev kol the years could go into Oma vavale lechasarin kis vayla lechasarin kis the golidata shenoish man the asura also liyade the davashena also lihis yayishu. Okay, so Rashi is saying that it's a dover, it's a thing that person wouldn't be miyayish because he has a siman. But all these examples we're talking about is whether or not that siman really has some validity. So if it's going to be okay, so I posited the case where he had the name Chaim or whatever. But what happens if it's a different type of siman where everybody might recognize the siman, not just the Jew? So then the question is, if he's in a town where there might not be a lot of Eden, but there was an unusual siman, so maybe he'll get up and say, I lost a watch and it had such and such a marking on it, which is unusual. If anybody finds this, it's mine. So then it's not necessarily that it would be only a Yid, maybe a non, and maybe a non-from Jew or even a non-Jew might find it. But the expectation is when we talk about a siman, that it's already something that he might not be miyayish. So the Gemara comes to tell us that in that circumstance, there is no machlokes. Even Rava would agree that there's no yiyush until the person actually knows and it is miyayish. Again, we're talking in the larger picture.
Excuse me, Rabbi. I forgot to ask whether Louis, do you have any refuah shlema? No, thank you. That was the last interruption.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that's what the Gemara wants to tell us is the distinguishing factor is when there is a siman. Now, so the Gemara is going to posit several circumstances, and we're going to have to understand what the story is. So, for instance, bezuta shel yam. If someone was at the beach and he dropped his watch, and the beach has what, high tide and low tide. So he dropped it near the water, but it was low tide, so it clearly fell in the sand. Can't quite find it, but it fell in the sand. Now, a few hours later, high tide will come. The water will come washing over all that sand and start pulling back objects that maybe have been just under the sand because the force of the water will pull it back. So bezuta shel yam, ub'shlilasa shel nahar. Also, he lives by a river where after a big rain or in some times of the season, the banks of the river will overflow and there'll be water all over the place. And then when it recesses back into the riverbed, it will take with it sediment and other things that may have been on the shore. So if he lost something near the river and then the river overflowed and came back, what are those circumstances? That's what the Gemara is talking about. Zok the Gemara, Afagafi is a simin, even though he dropped a watch that has a simin, Rahmana Shari, the Torah allows it. In other words, it allows the person to take it. And can be the name of the comment. So as we'll explain. So in other words, these are cases where there are a simin, there is a simin. So clearly says the Gemara, when there's a simin, even Rava agrees there's no yish except in circumstances where it is irreversible, like the Zuta Shel Yam, the Shlula Shel Nahar. So what is the machlokes? If it's not by simin, what is the machlokes between Abaye and Rava? Ki kliki b'davar she'ein bo simin. So the actual machlokes between Abaye and Rava is where there is no simin. Abaye amar lo have yish. Abaye says there is no yish, the whole lo yoda the nofel minay, because according to Abaye, you have to have cognizant knowledge in order to be miyayish. The word yish means that I give up. So what do I give up? I know something occurred and I give up. I said, no way I'm going to get it back. So in other words, you have to have full knowledge. And from that, you can extrapolate that if he has full knowledge, he can be miyayish. That's Abaye's. Rava Amma have a yish. Rava says that in that circumstance where there's no simon, there can be yish to the chiyada, and often miyayish, because he's imputing that in the circumstance where there was no simon, of course he's miyayish. Meima oma simona leslie begave mehashtahu de miyayish. So clearly, the question is, when does yish chal? So Abaya says it's only chal when he knows it and de jure actively is miyayish, and Rava, if it's a circumstance where if he had known he clearly would be miyayish, then we say there's yiyush even if he doesn't know. And of course, the big difference is that the person who finds it is he finding it be iser or not? In other words, the person who lost it, okay, he lost it. What can you do? The question is the person who found it, is there any issa of Geneva, or is there an issa of any kind of improper taking because it wasn't hefker? Something that's not hefker, you can't take. It doesn't matter. So if you say that it was hefker because it's imputed, then of course you can take it. But according to Avaya, it's not imputed. So it still belongs to the guy, even though the guy doesn't know it. And so in his, because he doesn't know it, there is at least the scintilla of a havamina that if he knew it, he wouldn't give up. Might not be. In other words, you will say to yourself, you know what? I'm reluctant to be miyayish, even though I know the odds are 999 to 1 that I'll ever find it. But I have such an attachment to this piece of whatever, a watch without markings or ring or something. I can't in my heart be miyayish. I just can't. I can't give up. We find this, that sometimes we lose things in our own house, and we've searched everywhere in the house and you can't find it. Short of making the bracha that Rav Meir Balanes says you should make on lost objects, you haven't made the bracha, but you absolutely can't find it, and you say, you know what, I give up. I give up. I've looked everywhere, I can't find it. So now the question is, if someone finds it, is there yiyush? So again, if a person doesn't know he lost it, but it would be sentimentally important to him to have found it, he might not be miyayish. So that's what Abai is protecting for that. And he says you can't know that a person would automatically be miyayish. Rav, on the other hand, says there's a great likelihood to be miyayish, and therefore we consider it yish.
What bracha does Rav Meir?
Rabbi Ness has a bracha. There's a tremendous bracha. I don't remember it by heart, but truthfully, we've said it once and found something. Now, again,
So you say, who says it? The one who lost it or the one who found it?
The one who lost it.
So basically, is the gist of what he's saying is
that
this is far fallen?
No, the gist of that bracha is that he should be zeicher to find it. I have to.
Oh,
Look over there a little.
What's that?
I'm looking on that chair.
Right. So in other words, and it's actually happened once that we once said the bracha, we had lost a package of some jewelry or something that had been stuck away, and we absolutely had no havamin of where we should look. We thought we looked everywhere. And then lo and behold, again, I'm just saying, we said the bracha. So remember, this does have there is a bracha attributed to him. In any event, so the machlokes here is when there's no siman, whether or not you can impute, the yish. So now, this whole rest of the daf and into the next daf, the Gemara is going to give different examples of where the raya might be like Rav or Abaya, and the Gemara says it's not. In other words, we're now going to see a series of examples. We had talked about some in the very beginning here. We're going to see a series of examples where the Gemara is going to tell us what is the case. So we're going to start right off with our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say in the beginning? Our Mishnah started off by saying, Matzah Peris Mufuzarin, Morris Mufuzaris, if you found scattered fruit, apples, oranges, no markings, or quarters, nickels, dimes, pennies, whatever, all scattered around. Those have no simon. So now let's start that Gemara. Toshima, Peris Mufuzarin, someone found a fallen fruit, right? Holoyada the nafalmine. And let's say he was carrying a cart and the fruit fell off. He doesn't even know it fell off. right? He doesn't know it fell off. So l'chayra, that should be a raya to Rava right away. We should see that the raya to Rava is that Yir Shalom Midas, when there's no siman, right away it's a raya to Rava that that have a yish. So why is that not a good raya? Right away from the Mishnah. Amar Uker Bachama Hacha Machnashta de Bezira Askinin. Davida Midasi. So the Gemara says, no, our case of Peres Mufazaras is not in the street, it's in the threshing floor. We had this in the Gemara previously, that when it's on the threshing floor, he knows what it is, and he says, I don't want to bother with it. Okay, it's a couple pieces of fruit or a couple of grains of wheat or whatever it happens to be. So the Gemara wants to say it's no raya from that, because we're talking in a case where it was Yish Midas, not Yish Loy Midas. That's going to be the key here, whether it's Shaloi Midas. So the Gemara says no, that you can't bring a raya because it's talking about where he knew it. It was on the threshing
Where
floor.
was it?
Okay, that's one example. Toshma, what's the next example from the Gemara? Mois Mufuzaros, the Gemara says by money that's spread out. Shalom. Amai. Why, if maybe he had a hole in his pocket and coins were falling him out. Amai holo yada the minei. So the again, it's a raya to Rava that if we say Mos Mufuzaros, that it is proof that Yish Shalom Midas have a Yish. And for the Gemara, no. Osam Nami Kid Rabbi Yitzchak. That case, it's like Rabbi Yitzchak. The Adam also Lamashrish Bekisa Bekol Shah V'Shah. So now this is interesting because we have habits. When you have something in your pocket, let's say a diamond ring that you're carrying to give to your kala or to your wife or to whatever, and that ring is securely in your pocket, is it not common for you to take your hand and pat your pockets? I mean, I think we all do it. In other words, when you have something in your pocket of value, you pat your pocket just to make sure you have it. So the Gemara says here that in the case where he had a pocket full of coins and he had a hole in his pocket, that he would be patting his pocket all the time for money. Now, maybe for quarters and dimes and nickels, you wouldn't do it, but the Gemara says that when you have something in your pocket of value, you do it. So if you do it, says Rabbi Yitzchak, therefore it's no raya that it is Yish Shaloi Midas. It could be it's Yish Midas. In other words, he knows it was in his pocket. He knows he doesn't have it anymore because somewhere along the way that money left. So then it's Yish Midas. And Yish Midas have a Yish. So again, the Gemara wants to bring a raya that's no raya to Rava from the Mishnah, because since a person pats his pocket every few minutes or periodically, therefore he will, when he feels, oh my gosh, my pocket is not as full as it was, that it will be years, because he said, where did I lose it? It could have been anywhere. It'll be midas. So again, we have another example where that happens. Let's go back to Rashi. Zuta shalyam Mekomas b'shvas hayam shederach hayam lachza lachura yud parsos or chamisha osa parsos, meaning the water goes back and forth 10 or 15 feet. Pamayim b'yom, twice a day. We know that's high and low tide. V'shotav ma'shemotza sham v'holach, and it grabs whatever was there and pulls it out. Zitu loshin gidul v'shirish v'loshin yav miyavane in the Greek. Moshikoz al zakenim. The Talma hamelach or yitzila al zatute. The shalosav shal nohar shugodol. It gets very big. The Yosef puts the gedosav and it goes out of his boundaries. The sholol and takes booty, everything that's around there. V'shotaf animsa takes everything that's around there and it becomes part of the river. So it takes its own booty, as they say. And so therefore he gives up. Rachmana shara v'atfilo bos liyat hamoisi l'fnei yirush. It's okay. Kama b'shmatza minayin laveda sheshatva nor. Okay, the Gemara is going to talk about it. Mahashta have a year shahari naful k'shiyode shuv ein dato alav, because he knows it, right? And he says, okay, I give up. I lost it. I don't have it. Okay, so now, those are two examples. The next example in the Mishnah was if someone lost a guli devela the kikor shel nechtam, meaning these cakes of figs that are made into pressed figs and baker's bread. Says the Gemara, Toshma yulu devela with kikor shel nechtam hari elu shelo. If a person finds a piece of a loaf of bread, it's his. Amai v'holo yonah the nofel minei. So same kasha. I mean, again, there's no simon on a piece of bread. I mean, there's nothing that's unusual about one bread if the baker is baking bread. So why? So l'chayra again, it's a riot to Rava that Yish Shalom Midash is Yish, and for the Gemara, no. Hosam Nami Agav the Kere made a Yadabahu. Since these figs are pressed, it's not just random figs that a person lost. I guess when a person has a pressed figs in some form, he feels that that's something that either he can retrieve or is not lost to him. So therefore, we're saying that if he lost it, then it's yish midas. In other words, it's not loy midas. It's not like losing a fig or something. It's big enough that it would be something that he would know if he lost it. So again, each one of these situations, the Gemara is distinguishing and saying that they're not proof to Rava that it's yish shaloi midas, but it has to be midas, because a person doesn't lose a loaf of bread or a ring of pressed figs, stamazon, one fig, one date, whatever, but not a whole amount. Okay, agav the kore made the yadamus. Since it has weight to it, it's heavy. So if a person's carrying it in his bag, he'll know that he lost it. Again, enough of a distinction to say it's no riot to Rava. Goes on the Gemara Vayter, Toshma l'shonish shalak gamon. These are the tongues of purple dyed wool. Same kasha. Why is it his? He doesn't know he lost it. And for the Gemara Hosanami, I got the chashiva mishmusha mishamis behu. Kid Rabbi Yitzchak. So it's the same as Rabbi Yitzchak with money. Is that this dyed wool, this dyed purple wool, has a lot of chashivas. And if a person has it in his pocket, he's going to pat his pocket frequently. So when he realizes he lost it, it's no longer yish shalom midas, it's yish midas. Again, same purpose, same mindset, that he didn't lose it shalom midas. Okay, Toshma. Okay, so Chaim, we're not getting yet to your case, but we're getting close. Hamotzi mos lebotik kinesios and lebotik midrashos and b'chol makom shaharabim mitzuim sham. If a person lost money not in a private place, but in a shul or a beis medrash, or in a place where the rabbim gather, Ari elu shelo meshabalim isyaishin behen. Like the Gemara v'hol yodad and nafal minei. So same kasha. He doesn't know that he lost it. So l'chayre it's a raya to Rava. So again, when it comes to money, we have this pattern that Rabbi Yitzchak says, and it's not just money. It could be rings, it could be jewelry. He means something that is of expense. A person normally is cognizant that he has it. So he'll pat his pocket to make sure that he didn't lose it, because it's too important. So Rabbi Yitzchak's theory applies again, that even in the Rishus HaRabim, now we're not yet at Grand Central Station, but even in the Rishus HaRabim, it would be considered Yish Midas. Okay, correct the Gemara. Now, so we finished with the Mishnah, and now the Gemara is going to give other circumstances where this kasha comes up. Toshma me'emis hakol adam mutorim beleket. The halacha with leket, which we've said before, is that leket shikra and peo belong to an ani, and a person, a regular person, is not allowed to take the leket that falls down. It's strictly for an ani. Says the Gemara. So when is he allowed to take it? When is it considered hefker? Mishiyolchu bo hanamushos. When the nemushos come. What are the nemushos? I guess the best way to describe the nemushos I laugh because if you've been to the beach, you know that people lose all kinds of things at the beach. I mean, everything. You can lose rings, you can lose watches, you can lose it. If you're ever at the beach at the end of the day, there are these people who come around with these little machines, and they sense metal in the sand. So they take this machine and they just walk along with this little machine. It's almost like a vacuum cleaner. It has something at the bottom and a long handle. You're holding it and you're walking. And when it senses metal, then it makes a sound. So then the fellow then, if he sees it or doesn't see it, he starts digging in the sand, and lo and behold, he finds a ring, he finds money. So to me, that's the image of an emushas. There are people who they'll fine tooth comb everything at the end of the day and make sure there's absolutely nothing left. So with leket is, there are poor people now but who don't have food and they collect food. But there will be people who will necessarily not even pick up every grain. But then you have the people who follow the poor people and they'll make sure that every grain is picked up. So those are the last resort people. So those are called the nemushos. The nemushos are the people of last resort for whom every little morsel of grain has value and they will let nothing go by. So the Gemara says that when the nemushos have passed by, then it's okay if someone else who is not an ani goes by and he happens to see a kernel, he doesn't have to say, oh, it belongs to a poor person. No. The nemushos have already been here. I can pick it up. There may be nothing left, but if there, lo and behold, there is, there's no longer the case of improper taking of leket because the nemushos have been there. And then the Gemara asks, my nemushos, Rabbi Yochanan gives an example, Savi de Ozle Atigra. Okay, maybe not far off from what I was saying. It means an older person who walks with a stick. In other words, you have a niyim, you have the young fellas, and you have the kids, and then you have the older people who never walk a little bit slower. They have a stick, and to them, everything is in slow-mo. So when they go with the stick and they still see something, they'll pick it up. If they don't pick it up walking with the stick, then you know that it is already good for that anybody can pick it up. There's a famous, this is Rav Shlakish's famous expression, the gatherers after the gatherers, kind of like what we're talking about. In other words, there are those gatherers who will not let a thing get through their net. And if by chance something gets through, which is one, let's say in 1,000, then you can take it. And that's just explaining what he means by the mushas. Frank the Gemara, an interesting kasha. So you're coming to tell me this will be a raya to Rava. Why? Because if they're allowed to take it, that means there's total yish. How do you know? V'amai nihida aniyim dehocha miyayish. Let's say we live here in Silver Spring, and in Silver Spring there are fields. Let's just say there are fields and leket and shikha and everything else, and people gather. Okay, so if we have a niyim here, they'll know that in these fields we can go ahead and collect, and they'll collect and do everything they have to do. But what happens if someone lives in Bethesda? Okay, and he's going to say, you know what? I know there are fields in Silver Spring, and I know there are farmers, and I know that they leave over food. So I'm going to go to Silver Spring today, and I'm going to collect leket. He's in Bethesda, and he wants to come to Silver Spring to collect leket. Says the Gemara of Amai, why do we say there's yish after the nemushos? Nihi the aniyim the hocha miyayish. The aniyim of Silver Spring will be miyayish after the nemushim. Ik aniyim beduchta achwina. There are aniyim in Bethesda lo miyayish, who won't be miyayish. In other words, why do you impute that if the aniyim in Silver Spring give up, that means you're allowed to take it? There may be aniyim from another area who will say, wait a minute, I'm going to come into Silver Spring and I'm going to try my hand here today. And I'm going to see if I can get some food. So why do you say it's considered yish? Why is it yish? The people from afar don't give it yish, in which case, and since we say you're allowed to collect it, that's a raya to Rava. It's again a raya to Rava here, because we're saying that after the Nemushim, you're allowed to collect. The kasha is, why are you allowed to collect after the Nemushim? Maybe the aniyim from far off will want to come and collect leket. So you have to give them a chance. So why do you consider it yish? Elamai, yish shalom midas, have a yish, according to Rava. Again, this is the havamin of the Gemara that wants to bring a raya to Rava, and it brings a raya from this circumstance of the nemushos, where people from far off aren't going to rely on the fact that the mushas may have collected. They're going to want to come and try their hand and see if they can collect leket in Silver Spring. Okay, so that's the kasha.
I don't understand how this is a raya to begin with, because you lost something of value. Let's say you're not that familiar with the town. I guess maybe that is the example here. You're not that familiar with the town. You don't know the procedure. You don't know that the sweepers come with their devices at the end of the day. So therefore, you were never really miyayish. You were thinking, I'm gonna go back and I'm going to look for it, right? I mean, what have I got to lose?
What have I got to lose?
You were not miyayish. In other words,
but what the Gemara is saying here is, if I live in Silver Spring and I see the nemushas coming through, that means I'm totally miyayish. I'm totally miyayish.
Oh, because you know the procedure in Silver Spring. You know
Correct.
That by 5 o'clock at night, when the sun is setting, it's already far fallen. But
It's far
someone
fallen.
from Baltimore, from Boston, may not know that.
Exactly. So the kasha is, if it's far fallen, so it's a riot to Rava, because there are the people from Boston who may still come, but yet you consider it Yush. So it's a riot, the Yush, Shalom Midas, have a Yush, because.
Okay. So again, when you're losing an object, if you're familiar with the mores of this town,
Correct.
then there may come a certain point where it lends credence to the fact that you were miyayish.
Correct.
Whereas that's no raya for an out-of-towner. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
But yet you have to account for an out-of-towner, and the Gemara says if you have to account for an out-of-towner, but yet the halacha is that it's considered yish, that's a riot to Rava. It's a riot to Rava because yish shalom midas have a yish, but yet there are people who may still come. That's the kasha. The kasha is because the people from out of town may come. Why are you not taking into account the out-of-towners who may still come?
Because they are lo midas, because they don't know.
Because they don't. Elamai yish shalom midas have a yish. We don't take into account because we say yish shalom midas have a yish like Rava. We say like Rava that we don't take into account those Bostonians or the Baltimoreans.
Right. There comes a point at which what it is, and this is this town, and therefore
Correct.
It's considered legally used beyond a certain point.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So that's that.
All
So
right.
l'chayra, that's the raya to Rava.
To Rava.
It's a raya to Rava. Nehida aniyim the miyayish ik aniyim bedukta achwina delay miyayish. So why do we say that it's yish? And for the Gemara, remember, these are all circumstances where the hava amina is on the surface that it looks like the halacha is like Rava because you're miyayish. In each circumstance we've just indicated in the Tashma, we're trying to distinguish and say, no, you don't say that. There are overriding circumstances. A person packs his pants, a person does this, a person does that. There's another reason why it's yish, not because it's yish shalom midas. So that's how we slug up Rava. So the Gemara says, how are you going to slug up Rava here? Because he says it's yish, even though there are out-of-towners. And for the Gemara, I'm given the ika aniyim Amrei given the ika aniyim hacha hanach meikara ayayish miyayish. Amra aniyim the hasam malaktele. So the answer is a little bit different. That in other words, he says the reason why it's not a riot to Rava is because fakert, the aniyim here, they're miyayish. They are totally miyayish. Why? Because they say that in other words, fakert, he's saying the out-of-towners will be miyayish. The Bostonians will be miyayish, because they'll say, for sure, all the Silver Springers already collected it. That's pshat. In other words, we're looking at it from the point of view of the out-of-towners. So the Havamina was
that they'll say, we don't know what's going on in Silver Spring. And the way you resolve that is, no, they're going to be more miyayish even. They're going to
because they'll
say,
say that all the Silver Springers will surely have collected it.
right,
Therefore, so again, it's not a riot to Rava that Shiur Shaloi Midas, because those people will miyayish Midas. They'll say, I have no Havamina of coming into Silver Spring to collect, because all the Silver Springers and their aftermath, the Nemushas, whoever, all will take it. So again, the Gemara is flipping the page and saying it the other way around. It's no raya, because clearly the out-of-towners will have given up by saying Silver Spring is such a big community and there's so many people. For sure, they collected leket, and for sure the Nemushas collected leket. What are we going to waste our time coming into Silver Spring to collect leket?
so we don't have a raya at the moment.
Right, so we don't have a riot to Rava. Exactly. Same circumstance. Okay. Let's take a look at some Rashis. In other words, all these circumstances that we're slugging up Rava, we're saying it didn't fall. It was midas. When a person loses coins from his pocket, it's not Yir Shaloi Midas, it's midas, because he pats his pocket, he knows he has the money, and all of a sudden he doesn't. So he's miyayish. Oh my gosh, I lost this. Where I have to be miyayish because I didn't even know where I lost it. It was money, right? Also, lamashmesh, he'll pat. In other words, we're going to say that before the finder finds it, the owner will have already known he lost it and be miyayish, meaning that when he walks along and pats his pocket, and then he pats his pocket a minute and a half later, and he's already traveled quite a bit, and it fell out of his pocket, right? Let's say he's biking, and he's biking along, and every 5 minutes he pats his pocket. Okay, fine. He pats his pocket. 5 minutes later, he pats again. He's already gone a mile and a half, or however fast he bites, and it was coins. And he says, "Oh my gosh, where did my money go?" So before someone would have a chance to find that money that fell on the street, he's already miyayish, because he says, no way I'm going to find that money. So that's the shot we give to why when you are yish midas, it'll more likely than not be before the finder will find. We don't know when the finder is going to find. He may find right away, he may find tomorrow or next week. But we're assuming that when a person constantly checks himself and loses it and says, oh boy, I give up, I lost it, it will be before the finder will find. That's the assumption made here. Okay, the Yikri Kabed Masa, by the case of the pressed figs, it's heavy. So he'll know right away, or let's say a loaf of bread, it's heavy, he'll know he lost it. Savi de Azle Atigra, what are the mushos? A Savi, like an older person who walks with a stick. The Kedim Aniyim, older Aniyim, Holchim Al Mishantam, right? Benachas, they go slowly, Beroin called Shibolas to Shibolas, they see every single kernel. So therefore, they're the Nemushos. In other words, they, with their eyes, will see everything because they go walking slowly. The Lashon Nemushos kamo lo yamushu shemin mashmashin v'holchim, because they literally take a step and look and stop, take a step and look and stop, so they won't miss anything. And Shlachim says lakusi basa lakuti Lashon Nemushos kamo lo yamish shenotlu masan hakol mulifneya. It's the same principle. So in other words, they won't miss a thing. So either way, that's pshat nemushos. Va'amai iyir shalom medas lavi yirshu. The lahid legabe ani and the haka have a yish medas shiro shaholchabar and the mishas nisyashu. Elani and the iracheres adan lo yadu. They won't know the nemushos came. The heich mutarimbo. How could you be matter? Elamishum the given to the chiyoda miyayish. So that's the pshat in Rava, is that he would give up. He would totally give up. So The Gemara answers no and flips it and said it's the other way around, that it's not, um, it's the people from out of town who will be miyayish. And therefore it's yish midas, not yish shalom midas.
Are we
Okay.
we're talking about somebody who gathers crops after they've been harvested, or are we talking about somebody who drops a watch?
We're talking about, basically, we're talking about aniyim, the poor people who are allowed to collect the leket,
Okay, so you're talking about a farm or something.
a farm, exactly, where the mitzvah of leket shikra and peah, that you're not, in other words, you're the farmer, and the kernels that fall from the machine or from the sky or whatever you're using, you're not allowed to pick up. That belongs to the aniyim. So the question is, when can you pick something? When can you, the owner, or me, a balabos from another town, when can I pick up a kernel that's in your field that doesn't rightly belong to an ani, to a poor person? So the Gemara goes through and says that typically when a person drops the leket, it's picked up, and if it's not picked up by them, there's a second wave of people who are much more careful to pick things up, and they'll pick things up. In other words, everything will be picked up. If you happen to go after that second wave and you still find something in the field, that is no longer considered leket. That's considered anybody can take it, even a rich person, and you're allowed to take it. So the Gemara wants to bring a riot from here that you see that it's like Rava, that yish shaloi midas have a yish, because if he gives up and says, "Oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to collect," then it's considered yish, and it is yish. So the Gemara asks the question, why is it yish? There are people from another community who may not know that it's been picked clean, and they'll come from another farm or from another town because they don't have enough food there. They'll make the trip to our town, and they'll start picking up the food from our town. So why is
How do they know? How do they know whether
they no? That's the point. They don't know. But so it should be a riot to Rava. Rava says that if a person doesn't know it's yish, why is it yish? You're right. Maybe people from another town will come collect. So that's a proof to Rava that he gave up, and we're not even counting the people from the other village who will come. So you see yish shalom midas, that yish, where he didn't even know that there were other people, let's say, who might come. He gave up. That's considered giving up. Why is it considered giving up? Somebody is not going to give up. Somebody is going to actually want to collect this stuff. The teretz is, the Gemara says, no, it's not yish shaloi midas. It's not without knowledge. It's with das. Why? Because the people from the other village, he's flipping it around, saying the people from the other village will surely believe that they're not going to come to my village because my village has been picked clean. So in other words, it's your perspective. Who are you looking? Are you looking at from the people from our village, or are you looking at from the people of the other village? So the Gemara wants to try to distinguish and say that Rava originally was thinking that it was the people from his own village, and he said yish shaloi midas. And Abaya says not so fast. You could say yish shaloi midas. Yish shaloi midas is loy have a yish. The reason why it's yish is because the people knowingly from the other village were miyayish. If they're knowingly miyayish, then everybody admits if you're miyayish that it's it's a hefker. So I say it's no riot to Rava.
Well, who is it? Is the person who lost it? Is that considered the farmer who dropped the stuff? He's never supposed to go back and
No, it's the aniyim. It's the aniyim. It's the poor people who would be miyayish. In other words, if I'm an ani and I go to your field every harvest and I pick out the food, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this harvest, I missed it. I didn't come in time. So I said, oh, I'm going to go in the second wave. Oh, wait a minute. The second wave already came. Forget about it. No chance that I'm going to collect anything. I'm too late because the first wave and the second wave came. So I, as the ani, am going to be miyayish. I'm going to be miyayish.
Yeah. Okay.
But now the Gemara wants to say it's a proof to Rava. Why is it a proof to Rava? Because I, as the ani, am miyayish, even though Chaim, not Chaim, Shimon there from Bethesda isn't miyayish, because he's going to come to Silver Spring to try to collect from the Silver Spring farmers. So if he's not miyayish, then it's not Yir Shaloi Midas. Why is it Yir Shaloi Midas? There are other farmers from another place who may come and collect. Nevertheless, we say it's a good Yish, that it's considered Yish. So you see, Yish Shaloi Midas, where there's a possibility of someone else collecting, you're still considered as if you gave up. That's a proof to Rava. Answers the Gemara, it's no proof. Why? Because those poor people from Bethesda for sure are not going to come to Silver Spring, because they're going to say, wait a minute, today is June the 27th. The harvest was over June 15th. The first wave of poor people came on the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. The second wave of the people came 20, 21, 22. There's nothing left. Why am I going to come on the 27th to try to collect from the farmers in Silver Spring? So the answer is, it's not Yish Shaloi Midas, it's Yish Midas. So in other words, I as a poor person am not giving up because it's not because of lack of knowledge. I'm giving up because I know that there is not going to be anyone. So therefore, it's not a riot to Rava. Rava's whole theory is that if a person would know, he would give up. And Abaye says, no, that's not good enough. The only time you can give up is if you know. So this is a case of if you know, because the Aniyim in Bethesda, they know that everything was picked clean. They're not even going to bother to come. So he wants to say it's no proof to Rava, because there are Aniyim in another place who normally would come, but they are so sure there's no leket left over, so they are completely giving up. If they completely give up, then Abaye says, that's not a proof to Rava, Yish Shaloi Midas Havi Yish. That's Yish Midas. That's Yish with knowledge. And you can't impute Yish Midas, Yish Shaloi Midas from Yish Midas.
Okay, so what's the difference to the Oni, whether it's Das or
the difference
Das
is
or Oni Das?
here. That's an important. The difference is because if I find a diamond ring.
Yeah, but this we're talking about crops. We're not talking about diamond ring.
I understand. Okay, so if I find crops, am I not allowed to take these crops because they still belong to the Aniyim? And it's forbidden for me, who is not an Ani, to take leket. Leket is strictly for Aniyim. Why should I, who have the means, be allowed to take leket? Right, that's a good point. So we're talking about crops and whether I have the right to take what belongs to a poor person. So the Gemara wants to tell me that there comes a point in time where I, a non-poor person, may take leket that only belongs to a poor person. When it's been sifted and again sifted, meaning that the second wave came, by then everybody admits that there's no leket left. So the aniyim are miyayish. The poor people are miyayish and say, you know what, I'm not getting any more leket from this field. It's over.
But that's
so I come along.
Yesh midad.
Right. So in that case, that's Yesh Midas, right?
Okay, so the person who wants to collect can now collect because it's Yesh Midas. The poor person who lost it knows he's not going to get it.
He's not going to get it, right? So if it's Yesh Midas, then so Abaye says it's no proof to Rava that Yesh Shaloi Midas have a Yesh, because in that case it was Yesh Midas. He absolutely knew that everything was picked over, and that's why he didn't come. So you can't impute from that a case of Yesh Shaloi Midas.
Okay, but if the guy who's coming through is local, he knows which is which, but the guy who comes from out of town isn't going to know, so he has no right to pick it up.
And that's Abaye's answer. So Abaye's answer is because of the people from out of town, who they will impute. No, the people from out of town will say, you know what? I'm not going to bother going to Silver Spring because I know those Silver Springers and they went through this with a fine-tooth comb. There's no question that there's not going to be one kernel left. So for them, it's no longer Yesh Shaloi Midas, it's Yish Midas because they're giving up knowingly, saying we're not going to get a kernel. In which case, if someone does find a kernel, then you can't say Yish Shalom Midas because everybody will have given up. If everybody has given up de jure, meaning actively given up, then you can no longer impute Yish Shalom Midas. This is a little bit of a different example to understand. The others are more understandable, where you lose a diamond and you say, wait a minute, I lost a diamond. There's no way I'm going to retrieve it. But yet the Abaya will say, but you didn't lose it not knowingly. You lost it knowingly because you pat your pocket, and when you don't feel it in your pocket, you know you lost it. That's Yish Midas. That's a little easier to understand
No,
than the
I
case of
understand that. What I don't understand is
by the Aniyim, it's a little more difficult to understand. I get it. I understand.
in other words, if you're getting a niyam from another town, then they can, if they don't know that if the third, whatever they find, they can keep because they're a niyam, and as far as they know, they're coming after the harvest.
Right. So therefore, Abaya, in order to defend his position, says that those Aniyim from out of town themselves will never come because they will believe that everything has been picked over clean. So in other words, the machlekes here is, will Aniyim from another town come or not? So according to Abaya, they will never come because they will always believe that the locals and the nemushos and the collectors and the post collectors will have picked it clean. So they won't bother making the trip from Baltimore or Boston or Bethesda to come to Silver Spring. Why? Because it's Yish Midas. They will say, for sure, everything has been picked up. So therefore, Abaya says it's no riot to Rava, because in my scenario, the out-of-towners will not even believe that there's anything left to pick up. Therefore, they won't come, and therefore it's Yish Midas.
Well, no, wait a minute. If it's, so the term Yish Midas.
That's Abaya's theory. Rava's theory is not that way. Rava's theory is that people will still believe that I can come from another town, and therefore it's Yish Shalom Midas. That's Rava's theory. Abaya, however, says, what do you mean a proof to Rava? It's not a proof to Rava. People, the machlokes here, to cut it to the chase, is whether people from out of town, Aniyim from out of town, will come to another town to collect. Will they believe that there should be any leket left for them? According to Rava, they will believe that there is leket left for them. And according to Baya, they will not believe there's leket left for them because they will say that the local Aniyim picked it clean. Why should we bother coming?
You
So
also
based
have,
on that machlokes, we can understand the position. Rava says Yish Shalom Midas Havi Yish because he says, wait a minute, for sure here everybody will give up. People from out of town, okay, so they won't give up. But Abaya says people from out of town will give up because they will say there's no havamina, that the locals didn't pick it clean. Therefore, it's not Yish Shalom Midas, it's Yish Midas.
and also the Aniyim from another town, who says they're not desperate? Who says they won't come because of that? They're desperate for food. That's for,
But the term Yish Shalom Midas, that wouldn't apply to out-of-towners because they're not the ones that lost it.
Right. Well, again, it's a difference of how maybe there's a difference of how they look at the Aniyim from in town and out of town, and so
Well, yeah.
according to Rava, maybe that's the underlying source of the machlokes. Is according to Rava, the Aniyim from in town might expect someone from out of town to come. And according to Abaya, the Aniyim from out of town will never expect to come because they'll always believe that all leket shikha and peah is local, and what I get from my local farmer is what I get, and I shouldn't bother going to the out of town farmer because they have their own Aniyim, and those Aniyim in the local town are going to pick it clean. So maybe that's
so that means that the Ani who lost it can go back and pick it up. It can look for it. Okay, all right.
Right. So and again, so then the question becomes, what about the non-ani? Can the non-ani, the rich guy who's forbidden to take leket, can he, walking by the field, seeing a stray grain on the ground, pick it up without saying, I'm stealing from leket? That's the underlying question is.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, if he knows that the other people, the onion had been through, then why not? But the thing is, and he knows that nobody from the other town is gonna come through, so he
Right.
can pick it up even if they're people from the other town.
Right. But
If
the
you're gonna
que-
be
No.
Makil or whatever,
No, for sure, Jonathan, he can pick it up. The only question is it Yish Shaloi Midas or Yish Midas? Is it considered that he is picking it up without the knowledge of in other words, where the owner, or I should say the Aniyim, not the owner, where the Aniyim gave up because they felt, oh, we picked this thing clean, we have no Havamina? Or do we say it's Yish Midas because they know that everybody from in town, out of town, everybody knows that there's nothing left. And therefore, when the balabos is picking it up, he's not picking it up from the aniyim who gave up because it was only local, but even out of town, it was so far off that everybody gave up. So
so
it's a
the
little bit
argument
more
doesn't
difficult
make
to
any,
understand the
it doesn't make any
machlokes.
difference, he can pick it up in either case.
No, he could pick it up in either case, correct. We're not even we're not talking, that's not the upshot. The upshot is whether it's Yir Shalom Midas or Das. It's a little complicated. So I think
I mean,
let's leave it.
that's fine, it's
Right.
I mean, to me, it sounds like a semantic question. Why do they bother with it? I mean, if it's the finder who has to decide whether he can pick it up or not,
Right.
then it makes sense. But otherwise, why bother? It's
Yeah.
not clear.
Right. Okay. So listen, this is a little bit more difficult to understand it. So we'll just have to leave that for there. Let's do one more tashma because there's several more. We'll do one more tashma. Kitzias Baderech. Before we had a case where someone had figs and he pressed them into a cake and it was heavy, etc. So here there's a different Mishnah. It says Kitzias Baderech. If someone found cut figs, in other words, these were figs that were cut, intentionally cut, and he found them on the derech. Va'afilu b'tzad sadeh kitzios, and he found it next to a field of cut figs. In other words, a person came in and he took the figs, cut them up, spread them out because figs needed to dry to put them into cakes. So clearly, this fig belongs to this field, right? It was a cut fig that he found along the side of the road next to a field where there were cut figs. So it seems like it's very clear. What happened if a person had a fig tree and his field bordered the road, and the fig tree curved onto the road, and he found a fig on the road. Now, the fig tree from the person's property is leaning over. It's full of figs, and there's a fig on the road. Is there a havamina that this fig doesn't belong to that tree? Of course, it belongs to that tree. It's the only fig that's on the ground from a tree that's hanging over the public road. So, in other words, this is now a different situation where you find something where the siman is very clear as to what it is. A cut fig next to a field of cut figs, or a te'ena of a fig found on the way under a tree that has okay. So what do you do with that? Says the Gemara, muteris mishum gezel, upeturis min hamaser. You're potter from theft, meaning you're not stealing. It's very obvious what it belongs, but it's not stealing. And you're potter min hamaser. In Eretz Yisrael, you have to give maser on everything. If you find a fig on the road, but you know where it belongs, you don't have to give maser on it. Meaning we're very makel. However, also. But if we're talking about olives and carobs, like buxer, that kind of thing, it's forbidden. So the Gemara makes a difference between Zaysim and Te'anim, or I'm sorry, between Kat Te'anim and Zaysim Mecharubim. Frank the Gemara. Bishloima Rachel Abaya Lo Kasha. So now let's stop and think a minute. Is there Yish or is there not Yish here? Is there Yish Shaloi Medas? If a person doesn't know that it fell down, is there Yish or not? What's the question? The fig is lying on the road. It's under his tree. If he knows that it fell, he would never be miyayish. So the kasha is, would Rava say yish shaloi midas have a yish? So the Gemara says like this: Reisha labai lo kasha agav the chashivi mashmash behu mashmash behu te'ena nami mediyada the nasra. In other words, according to Abaya, there's no question that in the Reisha, because the figs are valuable, they're important, so he always checks on them, right? So therefore, if he checks, then that fig that is in the street is not Yish Shaloi Midas, it's Yish Midas, right? In other words, it's Yish Midas because he checks on it. So if it's found in the field, a buyer would say, you know what? Yes, it's Hefker because I check on it. And since I check on it, therefore, if I'm Miyayish, I'm not Yayish Shaloi Midas, I'm Miyayish Midas. I actually know what I'm doing. So therefore, it's no kasha from the ratio.
Well, now is he allowed, if he goes there and he checks and it falls in the public domain, is he allowed to pick it up?
Yes, because we assume that the owner knows of it, because it's something that he would know, because he doesn't, it's fruit and he doesn't want to lose it. Therefore, if it's lying there, because he is giving up on it. He's giving up on it. Yes, so Abaya says it is Yish Midas.
Okay.
Okay, now, Ela Seifa, Larava Kasha. But the second half of that Mishnah is a Kasha. Diktani b'Zeisim b'Charubim Asar, we say by Zeisim and Charubim. The second half, the first half talks about Te'enim, the second half talks about Zeisim and Charubim. So Zeisim and Charubim are Asar, so it's a Kasha. Why is it Asar? It's Yish Shaloi Midas. So now so this would be against Rava. From here we see that we hold like a Abaya, because if we're saying it's Asr and he doesn't know about it, why is it Asr? According to Rava, Yish Shaloi Midas. Let's say he didn't know that the Zeisim and Charubim fell down, and we're imputing that he was Miyayish, and here we say it's Asr that you can't pick it up. It's considered Gezel. You have to give Maser. So it's a Kasha on Rava. Now we're flipping the chart. We're saying, according to Abaya, I get it, because it's Yish Midas. But if you say Yish Shaloi Midas, why does that Mishnah say that Zeisim and Charubim are Asr? According to Rava, it should be Mutter. Amar Ravua, Shani Zayis. So he says no. So Ravua gives an answer to answer Rava, and it's Shani Zayis Hol Chazuso Mechir Chalav. So he says no, it's different. That Zeisim, you can identify the owner. I mean, again, we're gonna have to understand this a little bit clearly. It's not stamma fruit, where like you drop an apple or you drop an orange, and therefore every apple and every orange look the same, and therefore, of course, it's Shaloi Midas Haviyish. You know why Rava would admit here that it is Asr? He would agree that it's Asr, because Zeisim and Charubim are distinctive. They're not just another fruit, right?
The olives from one tree are the same as olives, are different from olives from another tree?
That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying, that the olives that you grow are different than the olives that I grow. The apples that I grow and the apples you grow are one and the same. The apples, oranges are the same. Zeisim are not the same. That's the point he's making. I'm not a farmer, I don't know, but he says, Shani Zayis Hol V'Chazuso Mochir Chalav. Its appearance tells me who it belongs to. This olive belongs to Jonathan. This olive from that field belongs to Chaim or to Jay. In other words, there is such a distinctive appearance of these fruits that you can identify them. That's a chiddush. I mean, we don't know that, but it's coming to tell us.
But
Right.
so you're no longer talking about an olive tree that hangs over the public domain.
No, it can hang over the public domain, but that olive will be distinctive to that tree, to that owner. Therefore, he will not be miyayish. So even according to Rava, who says yish shaloi midas haviyish, this would not be shaloi midas haviyish because, in essence, it's like a simon. Let's call it what it is. In other words, this fruit will be so distinctive that it will have a simon attached to it that people will know it belongs to Shimon and not to anybody else.
Like the
Maybe
various
other.
kind- yeah, like the grapes in Napa Valley, like each grower had,
It may be so that they will know.
size or color, or, yeah.
Right, exactly right. To the grower, it'll be so distinctive that there will not be a question that it's his. The notion Zais made the yada, duchte the inish. In other words, the possession of a person is the person. So in other words, that's an expression to say that something that belongs to someone is so identified with him that that there's no way that you can okay, so if we're going to say that by the Zaysim, in fact, the Gemara Nami, why don't we say the same thing by the Resha where the Tamarim fall down? Why don't we say that they're so identifiable that they belong to that individual, right? Amrav Papa, Tena in the filter Nimasis. So he gives a straightforward answer that you can't say the same by figs because a fig, if it falls down, will immediately become nimus. It will become mius. It will become maybe it'll not disintegrate. It'll fall down. It'll squash. In other words, it'll be unappetizing.
It picks up dirt. It's
Dirt and exactly right. The liquid from the ta'ena will right away run out, and it'll become dirty. It'll become mius. So and what he's basically saying is you can't compare the ta'ena to a zayis. A zayis and a carob are distinctive enough that people will know where it comes from, and therefore they're not miyayish. Even Rava will agree they're not miyayish. A ta'ena, on the other hand, everybody can see that ta'ena becomes mius. Therefore, Rava is correct, and even Abaye will admit that with a ta'ena, there's you're miyayish because of nimus. So therefore, there won't be a kasha on Abaye as to why he says that it is miyayish, because everybody will agree. So there's no machlokes Rava and Abaye in this circumstance, because Abaye will admit to Rava by ta'enim, and Rava will admit to Abaye by zaysim that it's distinctive enough that they.
So if the fellow finds an olive underneath the tree and it's a different color from the ones that are on the tree, does it make a difference whether he finds the olive has the same color as the ones on the tree, whether he can pick it up? I mean,
well, I guess again, the assumption is that the olive fell from the tree. I guess you're right. I mean, if I'm the merchant and I'm driving along and I have a different color's olive and I happen to drop an olive and it doesn't look like the olives on the tree, then clearly it wouldn't be part of that same produce, right? But we're talking about where you can identify the olive because it fell from a tree and looks like all the other ones. In other words, we're not going to say that if it looks like the olive on the tree, that someone else came along and dropped it and had the same color olive. We're not going to say that. We're going to say it definitively belongs to that tree because no one else would have it. Therefore, it's not Yir Shaloi Midas because a person wouldn't be miyayish knowing that the olive that fell off his tree right there is so distinctive that it belongs to him. So he would not be miyayish. So even Rava would admit in that case that it's not the Yir Shaloi Midas. It might have a Yish. It's not considered Yish. He would agree with Abaye.
so does that mean he can't pick it up?
Yeah, so you wouldn't pick it up because because it would be considered as theft. It would be considered theft, and because it clearly belongs to him. It's like finding something that has a siman where it clearly belongs to someone. You can't just walk off with it, knowing that it belongs to your friend, because, oh, I found it. There's a mitzvah Shabbos Aveda, and if you're over that mitzvah, then you're over a lot.
Okay, however, if the worker is going through, I mean, olives he wouldn't be able to eat anyway because they have to be processed and
That's
either
correct.
pressed or something.
Right.
So it's not the same as a fig. If you were going through harvesting figs and he wanted to eat one, he could eat one. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's look at Rashi. Ketzios te'enim shekotzim osam be'izmo umor shalahem zav v'shotchem b'sada liyavesh. So we're talking about where he wants to dry his whole field of figs, so he cuts the fig. If you find the fig on the street next to the field of cut figs, clearly it belongs there. I feel a bit sad. Sada ketzios sada sheshotchem bo ketzios yada the mahane also mutoros mishum gezel afagat b'chi nafel lo yada. Even though he doesn't know, given the lechi yada miyesh mahashta haviyesh karava. In other words, he would be miyayish because right away, as the Gemara says, it becomes miyus. It becomes very unsavory. So he would clearly, if he lost a fig, give up on the right to take it. So he wouldn't bother with it. The Keturas min amaser kedin hefker. The hefker part of min amaser. Hefker is part of min amaser. So therefore, if you find a fig, you don't have to give masa. The zaysim the b'charubim also kabaya. Bishlo mereshal abaya. Motzalu teruta demikara yoda beyayish in the first el. You could say, according to Abaya, you can answer that if he gave up knowingly. There's no such thing as yish shaloi midas. It would only be midas. Vitoni b'zaysim the b'charubim also. So kedatach mishum deloya vidu v'nosir v'leka lemebe yoda. In other words, in a bias scenario, if someone lost a fig or a carob and he knows he lost it, he would give it up. If he finds out later that he lost it, then at the time he lost it, he wouldn't have given up. In other words, it's not a case of, okay, maybe later if he's miyayish later, but by a olive and a carob, he would never be miyayish unless he knows that he lost it and gives up, because it is of such importance, of value, and is so similar to all the others that he would say, it's like a simon. So the only time it's allowed to be taken is if in fact he gives up later on. But if someone finds it before he gives up, it's usher. He's not allowed to take it. Therefore, we say as a general rule, don't take it, because people don't give up on these items because they're too valuable and they look like the like the others. Chazuso made machalav. So take a look. Mariso niker shamihu. Okay, this is a Metzias that by the olive, its appearance tells me who it belongs to. Mara the chiyode the nafel lo miyayish. He won't be miyayish. The mema alma kula alma yada the dininu. Everybody will know it's Shimon's zaysim because they have the appearance of Shimon's zaysim. But like hefkehain lo shaklulahu. So no one should take it because a fig is a fig, but a Shimon's zayis is Shimon's, Reuben's zayis is Reuben. In other words, obviously, okay, we may not understand, we're not farmers, but in that part of the world, when they were growing those fruits, it became clear that every person's produce had the clear markings that it belonged to that person. Therefore, a person wouldn't be miyayish because he figures everybody knows it's mine.
Can we go back to the figs for a minute?
Yeah.
So, in other words, the guy comes along, he finds one fig, and he doesn't have to
Return it. No.
Return it or give
Master,
okay,
right.
Suppose there are 10 figs. That and he picks up all 10, then he has to give one of them.
No, because they're still considered to be random, and a person, whether he loses 1 or 10, if figs fall off the tree, he gives up on it because he figures they will be squashed he figures they'll get dirt all over them. So the quantity isn't the ikr. The ikr is the nature of the fruit. If the fruit is such a fruit that if it falls down, it'll become mias, you won't want to touch it.
Right.
It gets all dirty. However, a zayis is not the case. So let's go one more Rashi. In the philoso nemos, of given the yoda the nasra mi para miyayish. Miyusa, he'll right away be miyayish. Oh, if I lose a fig, I give up. Those figs are never coming back. They're going to be dirty. They're going to be squashed. The mechinafla lo chashiva lo. Once it falls, it already loses its purpose or its chashivas or mafkala. So now the real truth here is that the nature of the fruit tells us whether or not a person will give up right away or not. That's really what we're talking about. Some fruits, if you know what, if I've lost this fruit, forget about it. You can have it. I don't want it. It's nimbus. It's no good. If I have an olive tree or a carob tree, then I say every one of those carobs, every one of those olives, are you kidding? I'm not giving up on those. So people in their own mind will never give up on it. Therefore, even Rava will say, it's like a simon. I'm not giving up on this. Everybody's going to know it's my olive and everybody's righteous and no one's going to take it. So under that circumstance, that's why he posited these kinds of fruits. There are some fruits that people will give up right away. There are some fruits that people won't give up right away because they have kashivas. Again, it's giving us a different perspective on different examples. If it didn't say this, let's say it said it about a ring. It didn't tell us this. You might say a fruit is a fruit is a fruit. A fruit falls down, forget about it. It's gone. The Gemara is telling us not every fruit is alike. There's some fruits that people will give up on right away, and there's some where people will say, no, this is too valuable, or it's clear that it belongs to me. Everybody knows it's my fruit, so why should I give up on it? So even Rava, who says yish lo midas have a yish, in the case of a siman, he clearly would say you have to return it. In the case of a zayis or a charuvim, he also says that you have to return it. Okay, so we'll stop here. But again, the Gemara will go on with other Toshmas. The whole point of this is to give us a perspective on the machlokes between Rava and Abaya, in what circumstance one might agree one way or the other. Clearly, in the case of the leket, we had a lot of discussion because that was a little bit more difficult maybe to get our hands around as to what is considered yish or not. But in some of these other cases, it's fairly clear what is yish and what is not. And so the Gemara is telling us in that machlokes what Abaya holds and what a Rava holds. So Mitzvah next week we'll pick up from this bottom Toshima.
Okay, thank you.
Yeshkayach, everybody. Everybody have
Thank
an
you.
easy fast. Have an easy fast, and it should be as we said in the slichas this morning, that we mourn all the things that happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, but La'asad Lavo, all of these will become happy days. So Shiva Asar B'Tammuz at the time of Mashiach will no longer be a sad day; it'll be a day of Sasam B'Simcha. So maybe hope and pray that day comes soon, where we won't have to fast and say Avinu Malkeinu, but we will all have a day of rejoicing and feasting, and we'll eat all of the olives and the figs and the carrots that we want. No one will have a problem.
You don't want to eat a raw olive.
More olives. Yeah, shikayach, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have an easy fast.
Easy.
No problem.